Hey, welcome to a new episode of Triggre Weekend Masterclass. And today I am going to show you a little trick that we apply a lot of times to prevent, well, what can I say? To make sure that you receive the emails on lab and your customers will receive the same email on your main environment. So what I'm going to explain you first in the application how it looks and what it does. And then I'm going to show you in the designer how I've set it up initially, and a lot of people do. And after that, I'm going to show you how it looks when you apply the little trick that I often use. So we've got companies, and if I would click add, I have a company name, for instance, Triggre, and a contact email address, for instance, noreply@triggre.com. And then I can send a test email to that contact email address. If I would click done right now, we would automatically send an email to noreply@triggre.com. But what often happens is that at a certain point, you're actually using real email addresses, but you don't want the email to be sent to that company. And how can you easily prevent that? Well, first I'm going to show you how this looks like in a normal situation where you don't use the little trick. So we go to the designer, we have the user flow, and if I would look at the user flow, you would normally say, like, okay, we create the company. If the checkbox to send a test email is checked, we are going to send the test email, and else we're going to do nothing. And if we look at the flow part, in this case, send test email, we see the following situation where we have a subject, a person to send it to, and the actual email itself where you send it to. That's it. And the to email address will be the company contact email, of course. Okay, so let me load a design with the little trick implemented. I've loaded my design, and let me show you how this flow part will look with the little trick implemented. So what we have here is send test email, and you see it's a little bit different because we added a few things. We added a decision which checks which environment we're working in, and you can see the action, the calculation, to twice. And what Triggre does is, as soon as we go through this decision, let's say it's the main environment, Triggre would check the action which is linked to the decision main and use that to in the email. However, if it would use if the environment would be something else than main, it would take the bottom two and link that to your email. So Triggre is smart enough to decide which item to take, which route it took, and which value is linked to that. So in the email itself, I can reference the to calculation, and Triggre will find out itself which value to use. And why is that a very neat trick to use? Well, what I've done here is the main environment. If I would use the main environment, it would use the input that I've defined. So the company contact email that I've entered in the application. However, if I would have a different environment, for instance, your lab environment, it uses application settings, the default to email address. So that's one that I defined myself. In each and every email that I use, that I send, will be automatically sent to that email address from the lab environment. Of course, I need to create a record in the application settings where I state with what the environment is and what the default email address is. But that way, you can never make the mistake that emails are being sent to actual customers or actual suppliers or actual email addresses without you noticing it, because they will all be sent back to your email address. Well, you can use this using email addresses, the to address, but you can also use this with the from address. You can use this with calculations. You can use this with everything. The only thing you have to keep in mind is they need to be from exactly the same type. So the to email address can be, they both need to be, both versions need to be, for instance, from the property type email address. This won't work if the top one is a number and the bottom one is a text. Triggre won't allow you to create the second one then it will show you that it's not the same type. So that's the only thing you need to keep in mind. And the funny thing is, if you would create the email, and I'll show you that, Triggre will ask you to which email address should the email be sent, and it only shows the to calculation once. So there's only one to select. No mistakes to be made. Another neat trick that I often use is I also create a property at application settings with the suffix for the subject. Because what happens to me is that when I'm testing, I see a lot of emails coming in and I know that I'm testing. But sometimes, after you've gone live, you don't see the difference anymore between those emails from the main or the lab environment. So what I do is I add a subject suffix to it. And I only define it on the lab environment. So for instance, I put lab between brackets at the front of the subject. So as soon as an email from the lab environment is sent, I see the normal subject, however, with the brackets lab in front of it. So I know exactly like, hey, this is an email sent from the lab environment. So just another small tip to use. Hey, did you like the video? Please subscribe to be notified about the next video.